Today, we're diving into what has to be one of the most incredible survival stories in all of human history. It's the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton and the crew of the ship, the Endurance. And let me tell you, it is an absolute epic of ambition, disaster, and just unbelievable resilience. I mean, that's the big question, right? How is that even possible? To get our heads around it, we first have to understand the sheer scale of what they were trying to do in the first place. Their original mission was, well, a monumental undertaking on its own. So let's set the scene. The year is 1914. Sir Ernest Shackleton, who's already a veteran explorer, decides he wants to go for the last great prize in what they called the heroic age of polar exploration. In a world with no GPS, no high-tech survival gear, his goal was to be the very first to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot. And this, right here, just lays it all out. Talk about a change of plans. What was supposed to be a 4-month trek across a continent turned into a nearly 2-year fight for their lives, completely stranded in literally the most hostile environment on the entire planet. You know, before they even got to Antarctica, they stopped at this little outpost called South Georgia. And the whalers there, guys who knew the ice better than anyone, they warned Shackleton. They told him the ice was the worst they'd seen in years. But Shackleton, he was so determined. And that drive, that leadership quality pushed them forward, straight into the jaws of the Antarctic. And that single decision, well, it led directly to the first major disaster of the whole expedition. Their ship, which was ironically named the Endurance, was about to live up to its name in the most tragic way you can imagine. Just look at how this played out. It's agonizingly slow. First, in January, they get trapped, just stuck, a prisoner in a sea of ice. For 9 long months, they just drift, totally helpless. Then, the ice begins to squeeze. You can just imagine the sound as it splinters the ship's massive timbers. And finally, the ship they called home, their only connection to the world, was swallowed by the ice. And you can just feel the hope draining away with this quote from one of the crewmen, Tom McLeod. As they all stood there on the ice and watched the Endurance go down, he said what they were all secretly thinking. The mission wasn't just over. Their lives were now on the line. So the ship is gone. The mission to cross Antarctica, completely forgotten. From this point on, it's just about one thing, staying alive. They weren't just explorers anymore. They were castaways on a floating, unstable sheet of ice in the middle of a frozen ocean. They salvaged everything they could from the sinking ship, but after they took stock of it all, they were faced with a terrifying reality. They had a tiny amount of food, maybe enough rations for 1 month, for 28 men. They were adrift, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest land, with absolutely no way to contact the outside world. The odds against them were, well, they were astronomical. And this is where every single decision becomes a matter of life or death. Shackleton ordered each man to carry only 2 pounds of personal gear, and to show he meant it, he set the example, leaving his own gold coins and a Bible on the ice. He wasn't going to ask his men to make a sacrifice he wouldn't make himself. And think about this. The expedition photographer Frank Hurley had to smash 250 of his 400 glass photo negatives, saving only 150, the very photos that let us see this story today. Survival became this brutal routine of hunting for anything they could find and conserving every single calorie. For an unbelievable 497 days, these men drifted on these ice floes, their temporary homes literally breaking up from underneath them. Finally, after this insane journey in small lifeboats, paddling through icy seas, they reached solid ground, the desolate, uninhabited, and completely isolated Elephant Island. Okay, so they're on land. Finally, a huge relief, you'd think. But they were still totally stranded, miles from any shipping lanes, with zero hope of being rescued. And this is when Shackleton comes up with this desperate, last-ditch plan, a true long shot. So, to get help, Shackleton and a small crew were going to have to sail one of their tiny 7-meter lifeboats across 1,300 kilometers of the Southern Ocean. They'd be sailing right on the edge of a stretch of water called the Drake Passage, and that is, without a doubt, the roughest, most violent sea on the entire planet. It was their only option. Shackleton handpicked 5 men, and they set off, leaving the other 22 behind to just wait and hope. For 17 days, in an open boat, they fought hurricane-force winds and these monstrous waves, and miraculously, they made it to South Georgia. But their ordeal wasn't over. Of course not. They had landed on the completely deserted, inaccessible side of the island. So close, yet so far. The final leg of this incredible rescue mission required one more, seemingly impossible feat of endurance, a challenge no human had ever even attempted, let alone overcome. You see, the island was split in two by this treacherous, glacier-covered mountain range. No one had ever successfully crossed it. In fact, a fully equipped team of expert mountaineers wouldn't manage to do it again until 1955. Shackleton had to do it right then with two other men, all of them exhausted and frostbitten. And incredibly, they did it in just 36 nonstop hours with pretty much no gear. But here's the thing that's truly amazing about Shackleton. Even after he reached the whaling station and was finally safe, his mind was on one thing and one thing only: the men he had left behind. You'd think the hard part was over, right? Nope. Getting back to Elephant Island was a whole other battle. Winter had fully set in and the pack ice was just impenetrable. He tried once, failed, blocked by ice. He tried again, same story. A third attempt, still no luck. It took 3 agonizing months before Shackleton, on his 4th try with a borrowed ship, could finally break through. And what about those 22 men he left behind? Well, they survived for over 4 months, living in this makeshift shelter they built out of 2 overturned lifeboats. And what kept their spirits up was Shackleton's second in command, a man named Frank Wild. Every single morning, without fail, he'd tell the men to pack their things, saying, "The boss may come today." That constant, unwavering belief in their leader was absolutely critical to their survival. Then, on August 30th, 1916, a ship finally appeared on the horizon. It was Shackleton. He rescued all 22 men. So after nearly 2 years of unimaginable hardship, being shipwrecked, starved, frozen, the total number of lives lost during this entire ordeal was this: 0. So let's be clear. The Imperial Transantarctic Expedition, as a mission, it was a complete and utter failure. They never even set foot on the continent they wanted to cross. And yet, it became one of history's most miraculous triumphs of leadership, teamwork, and the sheer power of the human spirit. And that really makes you think, doesn't it? Shackleton's story shows that true success isn't always about achieving your original goal. Sometimes it's about the resilience and the courage you show when everything goes catastrophically wrong. And in the end, it's about bringing every single person home.